I think there's a remote here. It's really awesome to be here with you today to talk about this topic. I was really impressed that so many of you raised your hand in awareness and support of some of the things we're going to talk about today. I want this to be an open forum, so if questions are coming up for you while I'm talking, please don't hesitate to raise your hand. This is meant to create value for you, so I want you to really feel like you're getting something out of this today. And so, there's no stupid questions, anything you want to ask me. Do I point this over here? Okay, there we go. So Evan already told you some things about me. I've been a professor for a long time. That was sort of accidental. I'm someone that really loves to learn, and the more that I was learning, the more I was telling people about what I was learning, and then I was invited to teach, and that turned into a lifelong career in teaching. I'm still teaching today. I lived with some indigenous medicine people and studied with them as part of my research, which I'm going to talk about a little bit in the slideshow, which put me on stage at a conference called Wonderland that happened in Miami last November, which connected me with the community of Third Wave, who's doing the psychedelics education, which is how I came to work for them. And my book I've been working on for a very long time. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how microdosing psilocybin helped me to actually birth that book into the world. But today we're going to talk about the framework of stress. We've already touched on it a little bit with our breathing exercise and with the reading that Evan gave you. When Evan and I had the conversation to prep for this, we talked about a lot of different angles that we could explore, and we landed on stress as the topic for today to frame the conversation about different tools and techniques that you can use, including plant medicine. So just so that we're on the same page about stress, stress is any kind of change that causes physical, emotional, or psychological strain. The big five, the most transformative, the most disruptive types of stress are death, divorce, moving, major illness, or job loss. So in the last 12 months, how many of you have experienced death, divorce, moving, major illness, or job loss? Okay, so like half the room has experienced one of the big five in the last 12 months, right? So a huge disruption like that, it dysregulates systems of the body, it dysregulates relationships, finances, right? Everything that's happening. And then you have all the little minor stresses that are happening all the time. You have to pay your bills, you have to drive on 95, right? You have this accumulation, right? And this accumulation has impacts on the body. The next layer of stress beneath the big five and the driving on 95, the next layer of stress is the things that have happened to us previously that are stored in the systems of the body. So there's something called ACEs, which is an acronym for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it's some of the things that we experienced when we were young, such as physical, sexual, emotional abuse, neglect, a parent who had some sort of mental illness or addiction, parents getting divorced, domestic violence, having a relative who went to prison. So how many people in the room can resonate with one or more things on this list? Okay, everybody in the room, right? So everybody in the room has experienced one or more of the things on this list. The higher your score on this list, the higher your statistical chance of suffering from a range of problems. And the reason is because that accumulates in your body. It accumulates like as psychic energy, emotional energy. It accumulates as plaque in your arteries. Like there's a physicality, like a biological collection of this in your system. And it's just part of being human. I think one of the great things about the stigma shifting and more people talking about mental health is that we realize like we're not alone in this. Because I write about a lot of these things in my book, and the whole time I was writing it, I was like, everybody's gonna think I'm crazy, like no one's gonna be able to relate to me, and now we're finally all kind of coming out of the mental health closet and being like, no, all of these things have also happened to me. Okay, so some of the symptoms that we see from the things that we've discussed, whether it's the big five or the daily stress or the adverse childhood traumas, some of the symptoms we see are difficulty concentrating, headaches, anxiety, anger, frustration, digestive problems, fatigue, decreased sex drive, skin trouble, muscle tension, teeth grinding. Raise your hand if you've experienced one or more of the things on this list. Everybody in the room. I usually have all of these happening at the same time. Yay! So we can all relate to symptoms of stress. One of the interesting findings over the last 20 to 30 years of research is that most of the time when someone goes to the doctor, up to 90% of the time when someone goes to the doctor, it's for stress-related illness. Meaning that this is a huge epidemic. Stress is a huge epidemic that's causing a lot of symptoms, and you might not know why your stomach hurts all the time or your head hurts all the time. You might not know why your back is locking up, right? You might not know, but what we do know from the research is that it's probably related to stress, more than likely. And so the more that you can self-care, the more that you can manage this on your own, the less likely you are to have physical and mental symptoms that require medical attention. So for the last 18 years, I've been teaching classes. I have 2 certifications in yoga. I have a certification in mind-body medicine, a certification in health coaching, a certification in herbalism, a certification, blah, blah, blah. PhD, all the things. So I've been teaching all of these things for many, many years. And this is the general model, the most simplified version, the water your plants and put them in the sunlight version of solving the problem that I've been teaching for my whole career, which is just recognize that you're under stress. The amount of distraction that we're experiencing on a moment-to-moment basis, you might not even know. You might even not, if you check in with yourself when we did that breathing exercise this morning, you might have been like, oh shit, my stomach does not feel great this morning. I was not even aware that my stomach did not feel great this morning. So literally awareness, you have to have awareness that something is going on. And then one of the things that we've learned is that there's a relationship between the mind and the body, which is why Chloe was having you look at the thing in your mind, see it moving through the body, see the energy, right? Is because we've noticed that thoughts affect the physicality of the body. If you're thinking all the time, I'm in danger, I'm in danger, I'm in danger, what do we have? We have cortisol, we have adrenaline, we have muscle tension. If you're thinking, I'm relaxed, this is the best day of my life, I'm having a really good time, what do we see? We see regulation in the nervous system. We see all the systems of the body, working more efficiently. So observing your thoughts, listening to your body, the symptoms of your body, and then once you've collected this data, you have the data, now you can actually make a strategy because you're okay, this is what's going on. I got these thoughts, I got these symptoms, I got this stress, now I can make a plan. And your plan can go in a lot of different directions. So these are some of the 1,000 things you can do to beat stress. I'm sure you guys have done a lot of these things. I'll read them and then I'll ask you. So nature, meditation, walking, exercise, sleeping well, eating well, journaling, yoga, affirmation. Raise your hand if you've done one or more of the things on this list. You did them today. We made you do them this morning when you came in. You know what these things are. You all know what these things are. You've seen the blogs and the podcasts and Huberman and somebody else and somebody else. You've seen all these things probably ad nauseum, right? And you're yeah, I know, I wrote the affirmations, right? This, for me, only gets me so far. I've done all these things, but when things get a little bit beyond this kind of care, for me personally, I need next level self-care. So for me, this is a great foundation. I teach all these things, I practice all these things, I recommend all these things. You should have them in your toolbox. And they should be a go-to for you when you start to feel symptoms. However, in recent years, I found that one of the strongest allies in my toolbox are plants. This came out of left field for me. I was not expecting plants to become a really good friend, mentor, teacher, ally, resource, support, tool, medicine for me in my life, but it just happened. It just happened. I was in the pandemic, similarly to, I think, experience for all of you, couldn't go to the gym, couldn't go get my massage, couldn't go to the spa, couldn't go to acupuncture, everything was closed, and I was well, shit, what am I gonna do now? The world is falling apart, I'm stuck at home, I can't leave the house, all the tools that I would normally use for rejuvenation and healing, I didn't have access to them. So I started walking and walking and walking and walking. And I just started exploring nature. And one thing led to another. And I ended up living with some women that were teaching herbalism. And I started learning about the value of these plants. Most of these plants are in your kitchen or in your yard. I mean, that's how accessible these things are. Things like aloe and mint and ginger and garlic. These are called kitchen herbal medicine. These are things that you have easy access to that will improve all of the systems of the body. So I fell down this rabbit hole. I learned that plant medicine is one of the oldest types of medicine. We see it 5,000 years ago in Sumeria. We see it 2500 BC in China. We see it in the Indian holy book Vedas. We see it in the Bible and the Talmud. I mean, we literally see it all throughout history as a source of medicine. How many of you have ever used herbal medicine or anything on here when you weren't feeling good to feel better? There you go. So this is familiar to you, but you also might think of it as like herbal medicine is here and like pharmaceutical medicine is here, right? You might also have this kind of gap, which is what I had because my father was a neurologist and psychiatrist. So I thought like, oh, there's the holy, hospital medicine. And then there's like, yeah, this is in my garden, but is it really just as powerful? And when I learned, the deeper I went into plants, like, whoa. Okay, so I started exploring how powerful these plants actually are, which I almost feel like there's been a conspiracy to like sort of block this information from us, because once I started to realize how powerful these plants actually were, I was like, whoa. So one of the women that I was living with in New Mexico and studying herbalism, she introduced me to peyote. And peyote is a plant that's been used for generations. It's this little cactus with the pink flower. And we started working with peyote as a medicine, and I was microdosing on it, and we were preparing it for ceremonies and stuff. And I started to have this relationship with peyote, which was like all the things that you were mentioning, like, wow, physical changes, mood changes, spiritual changes, insight, wisdom. And I was like, wow. And then the Michael Pollan books came out. Anybody read the Michael Pollan books? Okay, one. I highly recommend them. He's written 2 books about the way plants affect our mind and our body. And then I just fell all the way down the rabbit hole. Then I had to read all the books, and I had to explore all the medicines. I was just like, I have to know all of the things about psychoactive, hallucinogenic, psychedelic plants. I have to know all the things. And then I went to Guatemala, and I lived in Guatemala for a few months with a medicine woman who was working with psilocybin, and I started microdosing on mushrooms. So that photo, the pink and brown, is the mushrooms. That was the list that Evan read earlier, also known as magic mushrooms, really popular in the 60s and 70s. And I learned about these 5 plants in particular and their impact. So the one in the top left is ibogaine. Raise your hand if you've heard of ibogaine. Okay, not many. I'll explain what that is. Cannabis you've heard of, which has been decriminalized a lot in the last several years. Ayahuasca. Raise your hand if you've heard of ayahuasca. Okay, about half. And then peyote we already talked about. So these are some things that you find in nature that have properties that make you like explode in awareness, explode in love, explode in connectivity to your environment, to other people. And they've been used for thousands of years as medicine in shamanic cultures and indigenous cultures, right? So the ibogaine, that comes from Africa. That is a plant that is very powerful for healing addiction. They've now started opening up clinics for addiction in Mexico and different places where you can go and you can use this treatment. And it's the first time I've worked in addiction for like a decade. It's the first time I've ever heard patients come out of a week of doing ibogaine and saying, I never want to use a drug again. Like literally don't want to use it. Like not I have to go to 12-step meetings for the next 30 years to not use drugs. Like literally I don't want to do it anymore. It like somehow extracts the addiction from them. I don't know how it works. I'm going to show you some articles if you want to go deeper into the research. But I have talked to people who said, I was smoking fentanyl for 3 years and I was on the street and I did ibogaine for 3 days and I don't ever want to do any drug ever again, and like walking around like completely healed. I find it mind-blowing, but it's really incredible. The ayahuasca is a vine that's mixed with a plant that has DMT properties. Have you heard of DMT? Maybe half the room. Okay, so DMT properties, it again takes you on a hallucinogenic type trip. I've done ayahuasca 2 times myself. My experience was that there was this beautiful grandmother-like energy that like infused inside of me, showed me different scenes from my life, did like this life review, gave me all this information about my life, purged all this stuff out of my body that I no longer needed. Like we talked about in the earlier slides, all that stuff that was kind of like building up, building up, building up. I felt like she really kind of cleansed a lot of that stuff out of my system and came out like a totally different person in my experience. That was my experience of ayahuasca. Cannabis we know is really great for dementia, for anxiety, for like a lot of different conditions. Of all of these on the slide here currently, cannabis is the one most likely to be addictive. So none of the other medicines on this slide have addictive properties, which is one of the things that's so cool about them, because pharmaceuticals they give you, and pharmaceuticals are so highly addictive. If you're taking pharmaceuticals for pain management, for anxiety, for depression, the level of abuse potential that comes with these medicines is so dangerous, whereas none of these things are addictive. You can't get addicted to ayahuasca. You can't get addicted to mushrooms. It's not possible. Cannabis, however, does have addictive-like qualities. Okay, so I put some of the thousands of articles that are available to you if you do a Google search. Psilocybin blunted the cortisol response compared to placebo after a stressor. So what does that mean? That means when you're under stress, your body starts secreting a hormone that makes your body freak out. Psilocybin blunted the response. It was like, no, you're not going to be stressed about this. The traffic is going crazy. You're going to be fine, right? It blunted the response. A single dose of ibogaine restores functional neural circuits. So when you're stressed, what happens? Like, you know when you're stressed. You can't think clearly. You lose your focus, right? Your mind is scattered. What does ibogaine do? It restores the neural circuits disrupted by stress, right? It puts your brain back together. You're like, oh, okay, I have clarity now. I have focus now. Depression and stress significantly decrease after ayahuasca ceremony. That's pretty straightforward. Less stress after the ceremony. Cannabis reported significant reductions in stress and anxiety. Pretty straightforward. Naturalistic use of mescaline, which is the ingredient in peyote that affects you, improvements in enduring positive life changes, okay? There are so many of these research reports available to you. As Evan mentioned, in the second wave of psychedelics, which was that era of the hippies and Ram Dass and all those people dancing, okay? In that era, in the second wave, we started to have an accumulation of this research around LSD, around MDMA, and then Nixon was like, no more drugs for you. And then all of it became criminalized, and we lost like 50 years of opportunity to explore these things. And now in the third wave, which is why the company I work for is called the third wave, now we have the opportunity to revisit all these things through a medical lens, not through the Woodstock lens, like through a medical lens. We have the opportunity to explore these things and to apply them to, different medical conditions. If you're going to take psychedelics, which I highly recommend, then there's some things that you want to do. You want to prepare your body and your mind. You want to have great support, and you want to have a lot of practices surrounding the actual use of the psychedelics. Okay, this is not tripping at the rave, right? This is not going on, taking mushrooms and walking in the woods. This is like, I'm stressed out. I have a 7 out of 10 on the ACE score. I have all the symptoms Dr. Gabby put on the slide for stress, and I want to heal myself. This is the context that we're talking. If you want to do that, you need to prepare the body. When you go to do ayahuasca for weeks leading up to the ceremony, you're not supposed to have salt or sugar or spicy food or sex or masturbation or social media. You're supposed to get off all your stuff. You're supposed to cleanse and prepare for the experience. Once you have the experience, you're supposed to have a period of weeks, several weeks afterwards, where you're journaling about your experience, you're talking about your experience, you're working with your therapist. You're like, oh yeah, I had that insight. What do I do with that insight? The insight I had was like, my relationship with my mother is toxic. I have a toxic relationship with my mother. Now what am I going to do about it? If you just don't address that, you're not going to actually make the changes. Once you get the wisdom, you actually have to implement the changes. How do you implement the changes? We heard some of them this morning. You do some body work, you do some breath work, you do some yoga. You make the changes, right? This is not like a magic pill. You don't take the medicine and then your life is transformed. You get the wisdom and then you change your life. This is one of the companies that I work for. At the company that I work for, they have a directory of all the retreats and clinics and coaches and people that you can access. It's not the only directory on the internet. There are a dozen directories on the internet where you can find therapists and coaches and retreats and clinics and people who are educated in this body of knowledge, who can support you, who have the skills to do that. At the company where I work for, you can become one of those providers. You can become a coach. You can become a trained professional to help other people take this journey. It's not the only training like that. There are 20 other trainings that you can take to explore this as a profession, as a career going forward. This is your opportunity to ask me anything about what we've discussed so far. What are your burning, yeah, go ahead.
I have a question.
Yes.
Kind of you were saying we're taking the plans through more of a medical lens right now.
Right.
Through that clinical aspect.
Correct.
I'm wondering how can we have that, but at the same time still be in right relationship with the indigenous people who have been gatekeeping these medicines for a long time. You know, so I think that sometimes the danger, if we don't do that, is that we almost colonize the medicine.
Yeah.
You know, in the way that so much other things have been colonized.
100%.
So, you know, how can we interweave it so that we can be in integrity?
I love that question. And the reason it's my favorite question is because I'm always the lady on the panel with all the indigenous people when I go to the conferences. Like, that's always the panel that I'm on, because we always have to have this conversation about what is the bridge between the indigenous traditions and modern society, right? And so I come from a place of sacred reverence for these things, and not everyone who is going to monetize the medicine is going to come from that perspective. One of the things that I think is a middle ground is that I met this woman at one of the conferences, and we had a conversation about the medicines. Firstly, like, not everybody can go and sit in ceremony and do these things in that way. Like, you're a mom, you have a job, right? You're not gonna go down to Peru and sit with shamans for a week to do this medicine. It's not realistic, number one. Number two, there's not enough peyote buttons in the world for the 8 billion people who have trauma, right? There's not enough buttons. There's not enough of these plants if we're only using them in their purest form in ceremony, right? So we have evolved to be a society that has billions of people and a significant amount of trauma. And so biotech, by taking some of these things and being able to scale it, we can have a much larger positive impact. How do we do that? Maybe, you know, proceeds and profits are given back to those communities, right? There are organizations that are completely dedicated to the preservation of those knowledge. They have panels, they have discussions, they have conferences. One just happened in California at the beginning of June, right? So maybe we're supporting them, we're honoring them, we're including them. Maybe we're making it just an inclusive community in general. Maybe we're taking their wisdom and asking them, how do we translate this to billions of people, right? And allowing them to mentor us, allowing them to advise us. All of these things are happening already. But the reason that the industry is moving so quickly is because we have millions of people dying every day from mental illness. 22 veterans a day commit suicide. 22 veterans a day commit suicide from post-traumatic stress disorder. I mean, like, the level of trauma and depression and anxiety and addiction and suicide is so severe that, like, we need to somehow move all of that wisdom forward, but quickly, like somewhat quickly, so that we can really help as many people as possible. It's a difficult question. It's difficult. Other questions? Yeah.
For those that are interested but maybe a little bit skeptical, I don't want to do something quote unquote illegal. Can you share about the legalities of ketamine in therapy? 100%.
So the medicines that I talked about are plant medicines. They're naturally found in the environment. There are some medicines that are synthetic that mimic some of the things that the natural medicines do. One of them is ketamine. Ketamine recently became legalized. It was used as an anesthetic. They realized it had these psychedelic properties. It's not a traditional psychedelic, but now a series of clinics and different home treatment services have become available. New Life is one of them. Mind Bloom is one of them. There's a bunch of different services where you can do these things at home with a buddy, or you can go to a center or a clinic and you can have it administered there, and you can work with people there at the clinic. You're there 2 or 3 hours. They give you an infusion. You have an experience. You meet with a therapist. You talk about what happened. That's the first psychedelic to come online as widely available It's also rather expensive. I mean, one of the things we sell at Third Wave is a mushroom grow kit. It's like $100 or something. You get the mushroom grow kit, you order spores for psilocybin from somewhere where they're legal, you grow your own mushrooms, you make your own medicine, right? That's like so easily accessible and available versus I did 6 ketamine sessions, it was $1,000. That's a lot of money. And mine was really cheap. I did a cheap one. Some of the places you go, it's $2,500, it's $5,000, it's $10,000. Some of the retreat centers where you do ayahuasca, like I paid $250 to do ayahuasca. Some of the retreat centers are $6,000 to go and do ayahuasca in Costa Rica and Mexico, right? So money is going to be an issue in terms of accessibility, which is why a lot of these options, like a mushroom grow kit, is a $100 solution, right? You get the kit, you get the spores, you make the medicine, right? As long as you're educating yourself and you're getting, you know, you're going to the integration circles, you're doing the journaling, you're doing the therapeutic stuff around it. So yeah, ketamine's a great solution. Already we've started to decriminalize psilocybin in California and Oregon. In Australia, all throughout Australia, you can do MDMA and psilocybin therapeutically. So you can go to the doctor. You guys know MDMA, ecstasy, Molly, but you can actually use it therapeutically, which is how it originally started. So anywhere in Australia. So a lot of people are traveling to do these medicines, but again, that's not, how many people in this room are gonna go fly to Australia to take MDMA with a therapist? Like, and you lay and you trip for 8 hours with your therapist, and it's amazing, but like really, we're trying to, you know, make this. Okay, so the last thing I'll say, and then I'll hang out for questions, is I wrote a book. And I had been trying to write this book for like 12 years. I had multiple drafts of it. I talk about my adverse childhood experiences in this. I talk about my healing journey and all the stuff that I did to overcome my problems. And I had drafts of it and drafts of it and drafts of it, but it was still in that really like incomplete, like I can't put this in the world form. And then after I met the medicine women that I was working with, and I started working with peyote and ayahuasca and psilocybin, something about working with those medicines really created a resilience in me and a strength in me to really birth this into the world. And I attribute the medicines really to be able to get this project out of me. So Evan had mentioned one of the things on his list was creativity, right? This was my creative birth that came as a result of me working with those medicines. And I'm halfway through my second book, and I feel like the medicines are supporting me on that journey as well. I really feel like if we lean into this, it can really be an ally for physical and mental health, or creativity, productivity, and life-changing experiences. Thank you very much.
Well, does anybody else have it before we finish up? A couple moments. Questions? Yes.
Is there a particular resource or guidance about dosage?
Third wave. Like we have 10,000 videos and blogs. We have a sourcing guide. We have microdosing courses. We have mushroom courses. We have, yes, like literally the site has been producing content and resources for 7 years. And you could spend the next 7 years going through the website and you wouldn't be able to read everything or watch all the videos. Hundreds of videos, hundreds of blogs, how to microdose, what to microdose, how to source, where to get it, how to do it safely, like everything you could possibly.
Because I find that people have just a lot, and I'm an advocate, but I don't always know where to refer people to. Obviously, well, now we're connected.
Yeah.
But this is a great resource to know. So
yeah, it's a great resource. And I run the community in there, so it's a free community. Anybody can join the community, and it just has forums and forums and forums and forums, and I answer all the questions in the community.
What's the website?
Third Wave, thirdwave.co.
I just have one last quick question, if you could speak to.
Yeah.
I always found it interesting. There's over 200 species of fungi that do have psychoactive properties naturally occurring in the world. But with regards to ayahuasca, there are thousands of vines that naturally occur in nature. Mm-hmm. Somehow, thousands of years ago, people took one vine, took a second vine. Those two vines by themselves will not do anything until you activate them. Can you talk about the MAOI inhibitors and that whole process of how the brew activates this effect?
First let's talk about how we think that that's a really magical thing, and it's not magical. Humans were made to be able to communicate with the environment around you. Like, if you get off your devices and you spend some time outside, you'll be able to smell different things and hear different things and sense different things. Oh, I feel like the weather's shifting, or I can feel the lunar energy. Like I feel something different in my body with the phase of the moon. Like we're meant to feel and know all of these things. We're meant to feel and know when we walk through nature, like this medicine's gonna help me with this and this medicine's gonna help me with that. And like, depending on how much time you spent cultivating that, the more wisdom you would have in that particular thing. But like, this is intrinsic to being human. We are made of nature. You are going to become soil when you die. You are made from the earth. Like we are nature. We are removed from that because it's been thousands of years since we've been living in that way. But to be able to walk through the forest and hear the plant telling you, I am your medicine, I am your medicine, that's like, you have that ability. That is inside of you. We are made that way. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, like the best book I've ever read on ayahuasca is called Fellowship of the River, and it's written by Dr. Joe Tafur out of Arizona, and he teaches courses and he leads retreats, and is by far the most comprehensive and beautiful book about, he took case studies of all his patients over 20 years that had different kinds of conditions, came and did ayahuasca and had healing experiences, and literally goes from everything from eczema to like addiction. I mean, literally just all of his patients and the transformation that they had. So that would be my answer to your question, is like, that is by far the best resource, Fellowship of the River, for like a comprehensive case study of how ayahuasca can heal you.
But just like the quick 15 second of like the, if you brew them, if you take them by themselves.
They don't do anything.
They don't do anything.
Right. They only become psychoactive when they're mixed together.
Correct.
Right.
It's just very interesting that thousands of years ago, people in the Amazon found two random vines that wouldn't do anything by themselves.
Correct.
And somehow they had a vision to brew them together to make this massive impact that is now, amongst everything else you mentioned, one of the leading medicines. I haven't done it yet for various reasons, but it's
what are your various reasons?
I have diabetes, I have an insulin pump, I haven't had clarity about how that process will go with the diet and being pure. And also I haven't ventured to South or Central America yet to do it. Maybe one day I would like to, but in closing, the mushrooms have been very beneficial to me. They've helped me, as I outlined very transparently in the book, with the highest highs I've had and the lowest lows I've had. It has helped me, the loss of friends, the most difficult moments of life. The mushrooms were there for me. I would not have wrote this book without the mushrooms. I probably wouldn't be sitting here without the mushrooms.